Yeah, that seems to be going.
Thanks, Chris.
Okay.
Thanks,
Okay
Chad.
then. Okay then. So Catherine, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. So as the board recognises, we have service level agreements in place, depending on the category of work the team are dealing with. And as is reported every meeting, the two tables show our performance indicators as recorded against those service level agreements. So the first table is the 1992 scheme. So it shows our percentage turnaround, so how many cases we're meeting that agreed service level for, depending on per case. The comments in the last but one column relate to the last month only. So you can see for December, we did 100% of our divorce estimates and completed one case. With fire, we get a lot less volume than we do with the algae. So some of these stats, like you say, when we say we completed only one case, is because the number of firefighters we're actually dealing with is relatively minimal compared to that we deal with the local government association. The table does show that on the whole we are meeting our service level agreements. There are a couple of months, for example in October, where our service level dipped for retirements for active memberships, but what we do is analyse that. So they were a couple of cases which were more complex, so they had sort of divorce what we call divorce debits on them, or they're slightly more complicated cases, and one was an ill health case. So we did miss SLA on those, but they were completed within 6 days, 7 days, rather than the 5. So where we do miss things, unfortunately, obviously we aim not to, but we are missing that service level by a matter of days, not weeks. And we do monitor that and obviously go back and revisit our processes when that does occur. So that the top table was for the 92 scheme. And the bottom table, the second table, is for the 2006 scheme. And again, similarly, it shows our stats against each category. And in September, October, there are a couple of zeros, but this is where there was only one case per category, and they were completed just in 8 days rather than the 5 we were aiming for. So yes, we missed SLA, but only by a few days. Any queries on service level agreements before I go on?
No.
Okay.
No.
Member self-serve. Firefighter members continue to engage with our member self-service. I think they find it very useful. They're able to go on to the service and run estimates. And I know that our colleagues down in South Wales Fire and Rescue help us promote the service as well, so which we're very grateful for, because this is a great way of us communicating with your membership and for them to be able to really engage with their pension benefits. So thank you for that. And the result of that push on the communications is borne through in the results we see for member self-service, with nearly 85% of 92 members being engaged with the member self-service. So thank you for that, and it's good that we're working together to promote that service, and I hope your members do continue to see the benefit of it. So we have no complaints this period. So from an admin point of view, since the last meeting, our main admin activity has been issuing the 2021 annual allowance statements. So for any members who aren't aware, each year you're allowed to save within a pension scheme, and your savings must stay within certain limits before incurring excess tax charges. And as an admin authority, what we have to do legally is write to all members who therefore exceed that annual allowance and let them know the information that they then need to be able to work out their HMRC self-assessment and work out if so, how much tax is due. So we had to issue those statements by the 6th of October. There were a few late this year, but we did get them out. And since then, we've been engaging with firefighters as to what they need to do, whether they're going to pay the tax themselves. We can't advise, but we can certainly, and we do, help firefighters understand the information, which is quite complex for some, that we can go through them, and we offer that service where we can explain the annual allowance statements and explain what next steps they could do and what they need to do. So we try and make sure that people are aware that if they have incurred tax charges, that they meet that HMRC self-assessment deadline of the 31st of August, so today. So if we haven't had letters back, then we chase people. We don't encourage people to do the scheme pays mechanism. So if members do have a tax charge, that they can ask the fire service to pay it on their behalf. So we do that liaison between the members and the fire and rescue service to ensure those tax charges are paid to time for the members. We continue to work closely with Kim and the team up in South Wales Fire and Rescue with regards to McLeod. We routinely attend meetings from the LGA that give us the updates as to what the current stance is, and we liaise with Kim then as to what South Wales Fire and Rescue stance is and where we are. So we're making sure that we're delivering what South Wales Fire and Rescue Services have agreed with McLeod. The actual technicalities behind McLeod are covered in a paper further on, so I won't go into that now. The pension regulator annual return, we've submitted that to time, again liaising with Kim and her team. So each year we have to submit a report to the pensions regulator, and one of the main areas of concern for us, obviously, is the data scores. So this came in a couple of years ago, where the regulator asked all schemes to evaluate how good their data was against two measures. So they use a common data measure and a scheme-specific measure. So the common data covers name, address, things that would apply to any member of any pension scheme. And then the scheme-specific data is data required to administer those specific benefits. So from a fire point of view, it's pay figures, it's dates joined schemes, when are they due to retire, which scheme are they in, all the data behind the scenes which make sure that we can run accurate calculations. So the table there shows the data scores that were submitted to the pensions regulator. And we routinely analyse this data as well. So this is part of our day-to-day to routinely run data scores and look for any errors and look for where we can improve things. So this is constantly being looked at, these data scores. Again, our event report has been submitted. We submitted it. The data went down to South Wales Fire and would have been reported by the end of last week. So what we have to do every year is HMRC ask us to report on taxable events that happen from a scheme point of view and for some individual members. So for fire, one of the main areas is we have to report everybody who has exceeded the annual allowance, everybody who has exceeded the lifetime allowance, and any member who has received an unauthorised pension payment. So all that information gets reported to HMRC, and then behind the scenes HMRC then check that data against the money that's been received. So they're making sure that with the tax that is liable for members, that is due for members for whatever reason, is being paid by the schemes, and they tally the records up behind the scenes. So we've submitted that information by the deadline of the 31st of January as well. So that was my feedback, unless anybody's got any questions.
No, thank you for that, Catherine.
Okay.
I think we can come to every meeting. I'm telling you that now. You're rubbing his hands wonderfully, we say it.
That's
no, thank
right.
you for the presentation. And I fully understand things go adrift with the time, but I think the catching up with a couple of days is better than weeks. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's far improved, 100%. So, Rich, I can see your hand going up.
Yeah, just a question. So, obviously, there's a lot of people at the moment, members of two schemes. And obviously, the mandatory scheme pays and voluntary scheme pays have differences in how they're applied. Can you confirm how you liaise back with people who may have breached annual allowance?
So if people have exceeded the annual allowance in one scheme, so we would write to them automatically. So within the regulations, we are only obliged to report send pension savings statements, so details of people's pension savings, to anyone who has exceeded the annual allowance in a scheme. However, we recognise that people if individual members aren't going to be aware that they need to ask us for pension savings if they're under in two schemes but could be over when combined. So we send out joint pension savings statements to ensure that that member's got full and accurate information to be able to ensure that they're meeting their tax liabilities. So if you are under in two schemes but over when combined, we send a pension savings statement out, even though we're not legally obliged to.
Can you say that again for me? Sorry. If you are under, if I may, Chairman, if you are under in two schemes.
So as a scheme, we're only obliged to inform people if they've exceeded the annual allowance. So have pension savings in a year.
Right.
Okay, yeah. So but with the fire scheme is people can, when they move from the one scheme to the other, so for example if they move from the 92 scheme to the 2015 scheme, they're actually building up benefits in both schemes, so which is separate tax schemes.
Yeah.
So they could be under in both.
Yes.
But so we wouldn't be duty bound to send them any information because they're under in both, but we recognise that they do need that information because combined those pension savings take them over the annual allowance.
Right, so they're getting that information.
So we give them,
that's fine.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, so we give them the information to ensure that they're not, that they're getting the information they need, because as a firefighter, I would be quite surprised if somebody knew that they had to, if they were under in both schemes, come to us and ask for that pension savings information. Yes. So we're quite proactive with that and do it on a combined basis and send it out. Sorry, Richard, I've gone off on attack a little bit.
So how many people, it is quite complex. I think a lot of people have been missed by what the actual responsibilities are in this circumstance.
It is complicated.
How many people for a current year would fall foul of that? And how many voluntary scheme pays have we signed off for the current or the previous financial year?
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head. I would say at a rough guess, we get about 10 fire service members exceeding the annual allowance in a year, and maybe one or two falling into voluntary scheme pays. So your voluntary scheme pays comes in when they're tapered, when they've got a tapered annual allowance. So we do see that every now and again. Or, like you say, when they are members of two schemes. So there have been instances where the voluntary scheme pays policy could come into play, and then we've referred back to Kim and her team for direction as to how South Wales Fire and Rescue Service want us to administer that. So I know there is a voluntary schemes pays policy which we're privy to, so we do refer back to that then. So, but yeah, as a rough estimate, I don't know the actual numbers off the top of my head, but I would say maybe we get about 10 every year who do exceed, and then maybe one or two who then use that voluntary scheme pays policy.
Sorry,
Rich, go on. Yeah, go on.
Can I just ask then that all the ones currently pending for the service are checked today, because they're very small numbers, because it's the closing of the tax year for that, and I think individual members might have been in the misconception that if their liability is over £2,000, they qualify for mandatory scheme pays. Mm-hmm. However, if this is because they fall under two separate schemes, although from the stuff we're seeing, they're not actually in two separate schemes, they should be in one scheme with the change to legislation, that they're all carried out by the end of today, so we don't incur late payment charges.
I'll certainly go back and check. We did do an exercise the week before last where we went through the people who had exceeded and got a tax charge, just to check that we had heard from them, and we did send out chasers, some reminder letters just to let people know that the HMRC deadline was today. But yeah, I'll certainly go back and check.
Yeah, I think the challenge is that some of those might have been of the misconception that they're mandatory scheme pays because their tax liability is over 2,000, but in the very strange circumstance where they're not tapered annual allowance, but they are members of two schemes, such as the 15 and the 92, they would have been probably waiting for the summer deadline, not the today deadline. So I think there's some people that would fall under that category. So You just
Yeah,
check.
certainly check. Certainly check.
Thank you.
No problem.
But that's fab. Thank you very much for everything you do as well. So it is really complex, and we couldn't navigate it without your support. So
Thank you very much.
and the
Thank
support we
you.
get is absolutely incredible in terms of your and your team's knowledge.
Thank you. That's appreciated, and I'll feed that back to the team. Yeah, thank you very much.
It really is. It really is first class. Thank you.
Thank you.
I concur with Rich on that. I remember going on a course. It was I can't remember now. Chris, about 3 years ago, we went up to Cheltenham. Honest,
Yeah.
I was amazed the amount of money that some of the chief fire officers then had to pay back in their tax allowance. I was flabbergasted, you know. I remember there was one chief fire officer. I won't say where he was from. Not from South Wales, man. Or Wales. Was not from Wales at all. He was making quite a thing about it, but he was only looking after his own interests. You can see that definitely. But no, yeah, I can see Councillor Brown's putting a hand up and down. Do you want to come in? Or?
Yes, please, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question. I mean, you say in terms of exceeding the annual allowance, could you explain how that operates? Because obviously there is a lifetime allowance that pensions have that shouldn't be succeeded. Is it to do with the fact that too much has been paid into pension on the different schemes or something like that? I don't quite understand how they exceed the annual allowance, because I know that, for example, on private pension schemes, you can only put in as much as your gross income. And I just wondered if it was something to do with that, because obviously then there's a tax allowance that is allowed on you sort of get 25% on top in terms of pension contributions. So could you explain to me in simple terms how these tax charges arise?
Okay, so for the fire scheme, the test has got nothing to do with the contributions that are being paid in because of the scheme design. So because the scheme design, because the firefighters' benefits are calculated with reference to salary and service, so we're measuring over a tax year. So what we look at is the value of the pension of an individual has built up as at the 6th of April. Based on their pay and their service. And then we look at the value of their pension savings as at the 5th of April, so over the tax year. And we take one from the other and we have to multiply. So if the value of their pension savings was 10,000 at the beginning and 12,000, I'm going to have to try and do my maths quickly in my head now, 12,000 at the end, they've built up £2,000 worth of pension in a year. So we have to multiply that by 16, which is a factor provided by the government and is used across pensions industry across the country. So the 16 multiplied by 2 is your 32.
Yeah.
32,000. Well done. 32,000. So that would be the individual's pension savings for the year. So is therefore under the annual allowance. If that 32,000, so if the difference between the 2 years was say 4,000, then their input would be 64,000 and has therefore exceeded the annual allowance. So we're looking at the value of their pension benefits at the beginning of the tax year and the end of the tax year and seeing how much that has increased. So sometimes we see people who've received a promotion during the year exceeding the annual allowance because your pension benefits are based on your pay. If your pay at the end of the tax year is considerably higher than it was at the beginning of the tax year, then your pension savings are also considerably higher. And that's where we see sometimes people exceeding the annual allowance.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So it's probably more likely to apply to the changing circumstances or possibly the higher paid people, is it?
It's mainly your chief officers, your higher earners, or the people who are having relatively big spikes in their pay.
Yeah, okay, thank you. It's more understandable now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else got anything? Gareth, do you want to say anything? Steve, no? You happy?
No, all happy.
No? Brilliant, okay.
Thank you.
So, I lost my page and I'll be going to put it on a recommendation. This is the thing when you work from the house, you've got papers everywhere. So the recommendations are the members of the local pension will note the data on Appendix 1 and number 2. Are members quite happy with that? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, diolch. So we go on to page 19, item number 7, and that's Alison, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just conscious of the time because we have to conclude at 10:30. So I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of this report. This is a report that was presented to the Fire Authority in December. Normally, I would cite you on the report prior to presenting to Fire Authority. However, the timings didn't work because of information that was received from HM Treasury towards the end of last year. So what the report does is it highlights the complexities in relation to the McLeod case, and it sets out a bit of a journey in terms of the sequencing of events that we've experienced in terms of guidance and statements from various stakeholders. What I just wanted to share with you, though, is the position that we're in at the moment, which is we've got another report going to Fire Authority in February, so next month, which essentially confirms the positions set out in this report. So the position is that we are continuing to process Category 1 cases, and we are continuing to work towards adopting the MOU, otherwise known as the framework, in full. So the issues that we are dealing with and working through presently are in relation to tax, and those are set out in the report that's before you today. We are working with our tax advisors on the tax issues, and that is work in progress. The complexities don't just stop at the tax issues, though. Of course, in dealing with our various stakeholders, there will be the possibility of action taken against the Fire Authority if we don't progress cases swiftly enough. So I just wanted to share that report, confirm where we're at as an authority, and happy to take any questions, realising it is complex and it's a changing position pretty much constantly at the moment.
I haven't got any questions, Chairman. I found it very useful. It's not, we can't call it a summary, but it really did pull things together in my mind. I've got a couple of comments and I can't think what they meant. But then it was on Annex 2, I can't remember what. But no, I found it very reasonable and thank you very much. So I'm happy with this, Chairman. So she going through whatever.
You're on mute, Chair. Chairman, you're on mute.
I am. I put somebody on mute because my house phone was going. Sorry. David, my apologies. Dave, I didn't bring you in on the last item, so my humble apologies. I should have asked you to do any concerns, so my apologies for that, Dave, okay? Okay. Anybody else got us? Oh, Gareth?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alison, for the report. My understanding is that there's approximately 50 Cat 2 scheme members, essentially people who have retired previously and are currently drawing a lower pension than the McLeod Court has said that they are entitled to. They're waiting for adoption of the MOU so that they can have their pensions brought up to the level that they deserve. I think at the last local pension board we were told and expecting at the Fire Authority meeting on the 20th of December potential adoption in full of the MOU, which hasn't happened now. I think those members, I think there's a real risk, and I think this board must consider it, of those members either individually or through their representative bodies pursuing potential legal action over then the MOU not being adopted. Thank you, Chair.
Was it the same?
Alison, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Gareth, for those comments. As I think I alluded to in my opening statement, we are balancing the issues that we need to, and those are around the tax implications, and you will have seen from the paperwork attached to the report the information provided to us from Treasury. So we have an obligation to work through that detail, but what I can say, and hopefully it does provide some assurance, that we are working towards full adoption of the MOU, and we absolutely are processing Category 1 cases as a priority, but we are also continuing to try to understand what the tax implications are, both for individual members and for the service.
Mm-hmm.
Jim,
Good.
what's...
Hang on, Val. Let Gareth come back. Gareth wants to come back in.
Thank you for that, Alison. Could I just ask, with regards to the advice that you're seeking on some of the tax implications, are you expectant of having received the advice prior to the 14th of Feb Fire Authority meeting, or is that still an unknown? Thank you.
So our tax advisors are in dialogue and contact with the relevant people, both in HMRC and other groups of stakeholders. I'd like to say yes, we are hopeful, but obviously it depends on, where other organisations are on this. So the advice has been sought. I can confirm that. So we're just waiting to hear, what the position is.
Just one last really quick question. My understanding is some of the scheme members that have been included in CAT 2 have retired within 12 months and so would not actually be liable for an unauthorised payment. Should they be in CAT 2, or are there other considerations which place them in CAT 2?
So my understanding of Category 2 are those members who have retired. But you're right to draw the distinction between the unauthorised payment charges that HMRC have referenced in their correspondence. So that distinction is around the 12-month mark. So we are considering our sort of, what we do with those cases at the moment, with an eye to what the tax implication is likely to be.
Thank you, Alison, and thank you, Chair.
I think for the benefit of everybody, we need to get this correct for everybody, because I don't want to see somebody having a tax bill more than what they should have. So I hope everything will be resolved by the 14th of February for our meeting, Alison. Val, you wanted to say something, Val?
Well, I've got
Chair,
a question.
I keep putting my hand up, and I did before even Councillor Val Smith spoke.
If you don't mind, Councillor Brown, I'm chairing this meeting. Councillor Brown wanted to speak. I'll bring you in after Val Smith. I did
at the very start. Thank you.
Yeah. Apologies. Somebody better inform me stuff. Sorry, Louise. I can't see which knob to push to put the hand up. My query was how many cases have we got in the system at present? And no matter how hard we try to work with the memorandum of understanding, we could still be challenged legally. To me, reading this report, it seems an absolute nonsense. Whatever you do, or whatever we do, could subsequently be challenged. But how many have we actually got within the system here? Because Gareth made reference to officers who are involved. So how many, please?
So, Councillor Smith, we have 50 people currently in scope who are retired members.
Right.
And those would be defined as Category 2 cases. We've already progressed 2 cases under Category 1, and I think we've got another 3 or 4 in the system to be processed.
Right, and of the 50 that have already been dealt with, within what time scale was that? In the last 6 months, or?
Oh, so yeah, so the 50 are cover the in-scope period. So the remedy period dates back to 2015.
Right, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. The question I was going to ask was really about to do with, having read the paperwork, to do with a sort of an overview of the scheme. Basically, how does the memorandum of understanding? What are the other fire authorities in Wales doing in relation to this? And what do you know? What stage they've reached? And it seems as if reading through the papers is that the government advice is basically to do nothing until the legislation is in place. So. I wondered what your thoughts on that. I appreciate that the government advice seems to have come after the date in October of the MOU. So I'm not sure about the timing of that. So if you could comment on that, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Brown, thank you. So in terms of the advice received from HM Treasury, So the Scheme Advisory Board for England have written a letter back in response to that note from the Treasury, just with some questions and trying to understand what the implications are in relation to the tax issues. I think when you read the Treasury note, it's helpful, but there are some detail that perhaps needs a bit of clarification in terms of what the actual impact is. So that we're waiting for a response on that. In terms of the All Wales position, I would imagine we are in a very similar position in that we're all trying to understand the implications of the HMT letter and trying to understand what the tax issues are for individual members and the fire authorities themselves.
Thank you.
As I said, at the end of the day, everything needs to be made sure that the members of all schemes everything is correct for them, because I wouldn't want anybody to be especially overpaid, and they got to repay it back, because that would be absolutely horrendous. Gareth, I can see your hand up.
Thank you, Chair. And just a question, piggybacking on Councillor Smith's question. Alison, if Category 2 members, you said that in scope takes them back to 2015. Does that mean that some of those 50 Cat 2 members have been essentially or potentially on a lower pension than they earned and deserve for 6 years, up to 6 years?
Thank you, Gareth. That potentially yes. But obviously I haven't got the details of those individual cases, and it depends on the options that each member chooses in terms of the remedy choices.
Thank you.
Okay. As I said, pensions is a nightmare, and I'm just glad I got a nice simple pension I have. It's from RCT, so it's really, really simple. So it's not a firefight. It's not a firefighter's pension, but you've got a presidential interest here. Okay, so no more questions. Everybody's happy with that. So the recommendations is, when members note the content report, 2, agree the work should continue with meet detriment cases, and 3, a further report will be presented at the February meeting. Everybody agreed with that? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Brilliant.
It's a good report. Thank you, Chairman.
It is a good report, and I'd just be glad when this is sorted out for everybody's benefit. We're going to item 9 now. Alison, on page
thanks, Chair.
On 51.
Yeah, thank you very much. So this report shares the returns that we are obliged to send off to the pensions regulator. They are annual returns, and they cover each of the pension schemes that we are responsible for. So the 92, 2007 and 2015 schemes. In fact, Catherine alluded to them earlier. The first appendix, so on Appendix A, if you have a look at that, there's a guidance document setting out what we are obliged to submit, so what information and why. And then Appendix B actually copies the returns that were sent into the pensions regulator. You will see in Appendix B the details that we need to provide are the scheme manager details, so that's South Wales Fire and Rescue Authority, the number of members in relevant schemes, so whether they're active, deferred, retired, etc., who the permanent members of the board are, which is why it's so important for us to be clear who our permanent members of this board are, and the information, as Catherine alluded to earlier, relating to the accuracy of the data with which we hold. So you will see the accuracy levels are very high. In, for example, if I'm looking at page 65, accuracy levels 98 and 99% for the first scheme that we've reported on, which is the 92 scheme. So I thought it was probably helpful for you to see those returns, given that your details will be in them also, but also from a sort of governance perspective and assurance around the data accuracy levels. So I'll just pause there. Happy to take any questions.
No, I'm quite happy with that, Alison. As I said, our details need to be there for everybody to say. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at page 82, this is the scheme for 2015, I think, and then it says the number of members, active members. Page 82, sorry. It says the number of active members, deferred members, pensioner members, and total members. How many of these that are in the 2015 scheme? I think there's total members 1409. How many of them are going to be affected by this McLeod decision? Do you know?
Good question. We'd have to do some research on that, Councillor Brown. But the 2015 members are already in the new scheme, so they will transition, effectively just being moved across from the 1st of April. We'd have to have a look at the detail around of those who were also in the 92 scheme.
Okay, Val?
Yes, please, and it relates to the same paragraph, same section that Louise has just made reference. Looking at the numbers, okay, the second and the third box, the number of members at the 31st of March 2020, number of members as at March 2021. What struck me was the numbers as to whether folks, they related to the 2016 scheme or the 2006 scheme, and why the numbers had gone up. Active members, hang on, I read this last night and it was clear to me then, and it isn't now. What I was up, I think that members were actually becoming members of a scheme that was an older scheme than the one we have now. Does that make sense? Active members 1102. Hang on, 31st of March 20, and the 31st of March then, deferred members 21. Deferred members had gone up to 482, and pensioner members 1820, 1584. This made sense to me last night, folks. I'm sorry. It's not the pensions around. This is the, what scheme is this one? This is the 2015. 2015. Yeah. The number, sorry, Chairman. I'm sorry, folks. I completely deflected you. I was looking at this last night and it seemed to me that members were joining. The deferred numbers had gone up from 291 to 482. I could understand that. The pensioner members of 16 to 20. Total number of members 1584. Whatever my thinking was last night, I've lost the train of, but it seemed quite clear and logical to me what I was going to ask. If it comes back, I'll ask afterwards, if I may, Chairman. This is ridiculous, Val. This is ridiculous. I can't follow my thoughts. Sorry, folks. Carry on with the meeting. Val wandering.
Okay, you're on mute.
See, I do the correct thing. I put on mute as you're supposed. Everybody's supposed to be on mute to a meeting. I'm doing it correctly. Thanks, Val, for that.
No, thanks for nothing, Chairman. I'm
If you
rambling.
think of it later on, perhaps tomorrow, you can drop Alison a note and she'll answer your questions for you.
Yeah, can I
So
say? Yes, thank you.
everybody's content with that. So just the recommendation is that members note and return and share information for the awareness process. Everybody's happy with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So we go on to the next item then, which is on page 93, publications. Alison?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm going to take a whistle-stop tour through these publications because I think probably the SARB update will be of use to you as members. So with regard to the publications report, I will probably in future just put a link to these documents rather than print them out if that's okay. Just to flag page 98, starting there in terms of the update on the timeline of the new pensions bill. So the reading in the House of Lords and what the timeline is looking towards, so aiming for the bill to receive royal assent in early 2022. Then into page 103, just to highlight there's an update there on the immediate detriment framework. So, sorry, page 105. This covers off the joint statement that was issued in October 21 between the FBU and the LGA. So this is slightly out of date now because, of course, these publications have been out a couple of months already. Just to flag page 106, top of that page, the consultation for the fire scheme in Wales. We have submitted a short response to that consultation and we're awaiting the outcome on it. Just to also flag on page 108, the new pensions dashboard, just to keep that in your mind as a pension board. This is the onboarding of all schemes into a national pensions dashboard. Again, back into the immediate detriment framework on page 114. And then finally, some useful information on page 117 around the finance bill. So this is the new finance bill and the impact on the McLeod remedy. So this very much links to some of the stuff that we talked about earlier with regards to tax implications and changes to annual allowance schemes. So just to flag those to you, I'm sure you've all read the publications, but I just thought I'd highlight those sections for you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. I think, yes, better to do links in future. It's for the environment, save printing and save paper, so and save the trees. So I quite agree with the links for that. Any questions, members?
No.
No, it'd be nice if somebody does meet the legal charge.
Yep. Excellent. Okay, so we go on to item 10, updates on the Scheme Advisory Board. Alison?
Yeah, again, some useful things that came out of the Scheme Advisory Board for Wales. So there was a discussion on the new pensions bill that was introduced to the House of Lords, the one that I've just trailed in the publication. The discussion at SARB was very much around that responsible authorities need to make the necessary changes to their own scheme rules. So Welsh ministers are therefore required to introduce two sets of regulations. The first one is around the prospective regulations. So this is about transferring protected members into the 2015 scheme from the 1st of April. And the second one is around the regulations to introduce changes through the retrospective remedy. So this is the look back around putting all the tax implications, etc., into the right place. SARB also talked about the Welsh Government's consultation on the proposed changes to the 2015 scheme, and I just mentioned that we did submit a response. There were around 6 questions, I believe, And what I will do is circulate copies of our responses back to this committee for information. That was done just before Christmas, so I'll circulate those separately. Saab also talked about the provision definition documents that the Treasury are working on. These are restricted documents, and the aim is to set up a working group. And we've nominated Kim, my colleague here in the room, to be part of that working group. As yet, I don't think the working group has met, so we're waiting to hear when the first discussion is happening on that. And then the final point that was raised in Saab Wales was around the 2016 valuation of pensions, and the update there was that the final results are expected to reflect previous discussions in Saab, and no significant changes from the last update that Saab Wales received on the 2016 valuation. But there's another Saab meeting in February, and I'll get an update on the 2016 valuation at that meeting. Those were the headlines. Again, conscious of the time, but happy to take any questions on what was discussed in South Wales.
I'm just glad I don't go to the Saab meetings anymore. Any questions, anybody?
No.
Chairman, can I be a complete pain? Can I be a complete pain? Could we go back to page 82? Or perhaps I can. Let me ask Alison afterwards when the meeting concludes, all right?
Okay, then, right, go on then,
Because
yes.
I've just worked out what my thought processes were.
Okay, then, Val, okay. Thank you, Alison, for that. So we go on to item 11 on 125, a forward working programme. I think that's self-explanatory.
Yep.
Okay, everybody?
Yep.
Yeah. The only item on the forward work programme, Chair, was obviously there was a training session normally for the plan for the meeting today, but because of the amended timescales and the change of dates, the training session has been postponed to the next meeting.
Okay. When is the next meeting out? Is it before April or this is the last one?
No, this will be the last one now, the municipal year, so it'll be when the new dates come out then, following the AGM.
Right, okay. Well, thank you for that, Geraint. Well, on that point, as you know, we're going into council elections in May, so I wish everybody who's restanding all the very best, and if you are elected, if your authority puts you back onto the fire authority, I wish you all the very best, every one of you, and I'll see you at the next fire authority meeting.
Yes, thank you. Same to you, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Chairman.
Right, all the best. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thanks, Paul.
Alison?
Thanks, Steve.